Welcome to This Explainer. I am so thrilled you're joining us today because we're looking at a fascinating, pretty profound concept that literally flips everything we know about human progress upside down. We usually think the biggest roadblocks to human civilization are things out of our control, right? Bad leaders, a lack of resources, technological limits. But what if the real enemy is actually inside our own heads? The source material we're exploring today is an essay by Zhu Feng, and it presents this super provocative premise. Our own rigid minds, not just the minds of experts or politicians, but ordinary folks like you and me, might actually be the absolute greatest obstacle to human advancement. Let's see how a simple psychological trap ripples out to affect everything from the dirt under our feet to the very structure of our society. Okay, let's dive into this because Zhu Feng's essay centers on a thought that is incredibly provocative. When we believe we are right, we are already wrong. It sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? But the author is pointing out a pretty terrifying trap here, the trap of certainty. You see, the moment we become completely convinced of our own correctness, we lock the door to new information. We stop being curious. We just stop learning. Zhu Feng challenges us to realize that this feeling of absolute certainty is actually a massive red flag. It's the exact moment our minds solidify, making us entirely blind to the next necessary leap in our civilization's progress. And that brings us to a core concept, the fixed thinking pattern. The author defines this as the stubborn refusal to accept new ideas, new ways of thinking, new methods, or new concepts. Now, what's really striking about this definition is the transformation it triggers. Nobody wakes up in the morning wanting to hold humanity back, but the source material argues that the very second we stop accepting new ways of doing things, we unwittingly become reactionaries. We literally transform from reformers and progressives into conservatives who actively suppress the advanced forces of human civilization. We end up becoming the very barrier we thought we were fighting against. Part 1. Rethinking the soil, the farming dilemma. To grasp the scale of this fixed thinking, the author zooms out to our physical relationship with the earth itself. He shares a candid personal anecdote to prove that absolutely anyone can fall victim to this trap. While studying permaculture and natural farming, Zhu Feng realized he was about to become an obstacle to progress himself. He instructed the people at the Katayer and Gesar homes to clear away all the weeds in the fields so the fruit trees and crops could grow better. Now, on the surface, that sounds perfectly logical, right? I mean, it's what human beings have done for generations. But as he quickly realized, ordering the total removal of those weeds was a massive mistake. It was a lapse in attention, a moment of just defaulting to a destructive, fixed habit simply because it was, well, how things are done. And this brilliantly illustrates the clash between two completely different paradigms. Traditional farming, meaning the rigid, industrialized methods we've favored recently, relies on monoculture, aggressively clearing grass, deep plowing the land, and relying heavily on chemical fertilizers. It's a mindset all about control and uniformity. By contrast, natural farming and permaculture present a radically new method. Or actually, scratch that. It's more like a return to natural principles. It relies on plant diversity, ecological balance, and coexistence. Instead of deep tilling or even using organic animal manures, this method relies on the weeds themselves, on microorganisms, bacteria, and nitrogen from the air. It's a complete reversal of what we typically consider correct production. So why does this distinction matter so much? Well, because the stakes could not be higher. The author rapidly fires off the escalating consequences of over a century of our misguided, rigid production methods. We're talking air and soil pollution, heavy smog, devastating floods and droughts, hailstorms, extreme weather, species extinction, and the rapid desertification of the Earth. All of these severe planetary crises are presented not just as unfortunate accidents, but as the direct, undeniable consequences of humanity collectively violating natural principles. We clung to a fixed idea of how to grow food, and in doing so, we've pushed the planet to the brink. Let's move to and see how this builds into an even bigger question. Because if our physical survival requires us to shatter our fixed thinking about agriculture, it forces a deeply uncomfortable realization. If our farming methods and production models have to undergo a radical transformation to save the earth, what about our way of life? Shouldn't the very structures of our human society be subjected to that exact same open-minded scrutiny? Part 2. Rethinking Society, Marriage and Lifestyles. Now we're moving from the agricultural ecosystem to the human societal ecosystem. The author applies this exact same lens to something deeply personal. He argues that traditional marriage and family lifestyles are actually the root of human selfishness, a source of societal conflict, and a barrier to true freedom and happiness. In contrast, the essay introduces an alternative, the the second home lifestyle model created by Life Chanyan, which the author posits as a superior model that benefits everyone. Now, regardless of where you or I might stand on this, the core analytical point the author is making here is super fascinating. He asks, why do people suppress, attack, and slander this new living model? The answer he gives is fixed thinking. Just as farmers violently pull up beneficial weeds because they're obsessed with a neat, uniform crop, society attacks alternative lifestyles simply because they threaten a deeply rigid, traditional mindset. We kind of cling to the familiar, even if a new way might offer better results.
Part 3. The Law of Diversity. Lessons from Nature.
To resolve this tension, the author asks us to zoom out to the overarching truths of the universe. The essay draws a direct, unbreakable line between biological ecosystems and social ecosystems. Think about it. In nature, plant diversity is what maintains ecological balance. A forest survives disease and changing climates precisely because it is wonderfully varied. A monoculture crop is fragile and easily wiped out. The essay argues that this exact same rule applies to humanity. Social diversity is what maintains societal harmony and stability. Nature outright demands variety, and human society is absolutely no exception. Uniformity, driven by fixed thinking, is the enemy of both the soil and the soul. This brings us to a vision of true, radical inclusivity. To align with nature, we have to open our minds and stop insisting that our way is the only right way. The author calls for a world where completely opposing lifestyles and beliefs can coexist without suppression. If you prefer traditional marriage, you should have the absolute freedom to choose it. If you prefer a new communal living model, well, you should have that freedom too. Theist and atheist must be allowed to exist side by side. True harmony isn't about getting everyone to agree. True harmony is allowing a vibrant, unsuppressed variety of human experiences to flourish simultaneously. So the crucial point is captured in this ultimate metaphor. Weeds and crops must coexist, and diverse thoughts must coexist, benefiting and balancing each other. The weed isn't a nuisance to be eradicated. No, the weed represents any unfamiliar, diverse, or radical thought in our society. Just as the soil needs weeds to retain moisture and build a complex microbial network, our human civilization desperately needs diverse, even contradictory thoughts to balance our social ecosystem and drive us forward. Which brings us to a truly remarkable moment of radical humility from the author. After outlining this grand theory of everything, from farming to the fundamental structure of society, Shefeng pauses, reflects, and asks a simple question. Am I right? He actually admits he cannot be certain because claiming absolute certainty would mean his own thinking has become fixed. He acknowledges that there might already be someone out there with thoughts more advanced and closer to the truth than his own. He pledges to remain open and to keep learning. And so I want to leave you with that very same challenge. Look at your own life, your own strongly held beliefs, and ask yourself, are you right? Or is your certainty the very weed pulling you away from progress? Think about it. Thanks so much for learning with us today, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.